We have made it all the way to the finish line of the book of Romans. We are in Romans 16, a beautiful chapter, and we've got a guest with us today. It's going to be great. My name is Jeremy. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Jeff.
Can you ever forgive me?
I think so.
Have you seen that movie, Jeremy? Or are you aware of the movie or the book?
I'm going to need a little bit more than that.
So that's the title of this movie with Melissa McCarthy. It's based on a true story, apparently, about this struggling writer who starts forging letters by more well-known writers to make some money on the side. Pretty cool movie. Like I said, based on a true story. So it kind of has a tie-in to one of the issues I want to talk about today.
Wow, you are all about the little-known movie references that turn out to be gems.
But also the title has such a, spiritual, biblical resonance.
We're big on forgiveness. I think we can forgive each other. We also have a guest today, Jeff. You want to introduce our guest?
Yeah, we have Kevin Garcia, self-described, spiritual recovery coach, mystical theologian, practitioner, writer, internet human. Welcome, Kevin.
Hello. Such a pleasure, a joy, an honor, and I'm very excited about, cutting up, being silly, and also like digging in. It's very weird. I always tell people, I'm not a Christian anymore, but I love talking about the Bible. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
It's like I'm barely a Christian, and then I go off and do things like this,
Well, I think Jeff can relate with that.
Yeah, very relatable. Definitely would consider myself not a Christian, but wanting to talk about the Bible now more than ever. But yeah, Kevin, how would you describe yourself? What words would you like to use?
Oh God. In this moment, we'll just say for this moment.
Sure.
Mystic. It's annoying to say follower of Jesus because all those assholes on Twitter also call themselves followers of Jesus. But I'm talking in the most mystical, weird, yogic devotion to Jesus as a guru and teacher rather than as my savior. And it is a completely different path for me, which is why I think having conversations and reframing shit from the Bible, from the tradition that I come from, feels so appealing because it's the language and the waters that I've been swimming in all these years. And I frankly don't want to get into another ocean, So I've already probed these depths. There's a lot of good stuff down here. So I stick in the neighborhood, I guess. But I would describe myself as just mystic is probably the overarching thing. I've got practices that some people would say are witchcraft, and I've got practices that some people say are that's totally Christian. You're definitely a Christian, and I'm like, okay, well, Jesus said, who do you say that I am? Because I don't know, and I don't care.
Yeah, I love it. That sounds great to me. Properly wishy-washy. Jeremy, do you have any follow-up questions? What do you think?
Spiritually scandalous, or what's the nice way of saying that someone's a slut? Promiscuous. Spiritually promiscuous.
Spiritually promiscuous. That's a phrase.
Yes.
That would make a great t-shirt, I think.
Oh, don't tempt me with a good time because I do make t-shirts on the side as a side hustle. So,
well, I'll throw that out there. And then Jeff also is good with his graphics. So I think
oh my God, collabs.
Something might come out of this. I don't know. That's gonna be exciting.
I love making a buck. I really do. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a spiritual woo woo vibey ass bitch, but I love businessy things. I love making content and shit. So, anyways,
yeah, I guess we are more chaste on this podcast in terms of we haven't cashed out. We haven't tried to make money so far in terms of ad reads or making merch or anything. So I have made a bunch of graphics for the show that I've thought about making some kind of merch out of, but just haven't gotten
I'd buy it. You got a great eye for design.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.
Anyway, should we talk about the Bible now?
Well, hold on. Before we get into it, I think you said something that I'm guessing a lot of our listeners are going to go, what? What does that mean? Oh. So I love your explanation. One of the most unique explanations about your faith I've ever heard. But you said something about you follow Jesus, but not as your savior. I just love, can you elaborate a little bit? What does that mean to you? Why is that distinction important for you?
It's important for me because it sets up the relationship between me and Jesus, not as rescuer and rescuee, as like damsel in distress and the one coming to free me from my bondage, but rather from the perspective of a student and a teacher, where I willingly, quote unquote willingly, I guess, however you submit to a dead person's yoke, right? But like I willingly give myself to this path and of wanting to become like my teacher. And I'm not just talking just like in what I read in the Bible. I'm talking about having like concentrating on the metaphysical presence of the Christ and calling that into my person. Not me, because for me, like hell's not real. Hell never was real. The separation between us and God isn't real. And technically, you don't even need Christ in order to experience God, if you will. I think that for me, Jesus is the thing that bridges that gap we call shame. It bridges that gap that I call my own perceptions. It bridges the gap I call my fears between me and God. Jesus gets me across that. He reminds me that it doesn't matter what the fuck I think or believe, that love is here and it's accessible if you want it, if you can turn your eyes upon Jesus, if you will. I see him as a friend who's willing to help if you ask, but he's not bothered if you don't. Because Jesus is just chilling. He's experiencing the glory of love and being one with God and all of creation from the jump. And he's saying to us, you could do greater things. What a concept. And so, like, I don't think I'm being saved from anything. I believe that I'm being set free from the bullshit of this world, from the bullshit of empire and patriarchy and capitalism and white supremacy and misogyny and self-hate. Like I get like this is where I get on my soapbox a little bit. I think Jesus is one of the greatest teachers to ever grace the earth. And I don't believe that he was the only one, but he's mine. And that is I have a devotional practice to him. The same way that like, people will have a devotional practice towards their living guru, if you will. Somebody like a guru literally translates from Sanskrit into English as dispeller of darkness, reflexively bringer of light, someone who like gives you the perspective that you need. And Jesus does that for me.
So
I don't need anybody else to believe it the same way either. I just want to say that.
Yeah. So in that way, would you say, you reference Jesus as a dead person. Do you think that, it was just a human that died and you've really been drawn to his teachings, or do you think there's a supernatural, he is still alive today? How do you see that?
He said, whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you will remember me. So as far as I'm concerned, whether it's like, I can't prove any of this is real. Nobody can prove any of this is real. I said, but I'm not looking for what's true. I'm looking for what is helpful. And so for me, the thought of Jesus being an elder brother who has gone further down the path and is calling me onward is so helpful to me. And I don't need to prove that. I don't need it to be quote unquote, like provable truth. The spirit of Jesus is alive. Like I have my own experiences of that. And even if that's only in my head, what has it done for me? It has caused me to blossom. It has caused me to come alive. And that for me is enough. And so I don't need proof anymore. I have experience. And so that's what's so lovely is that like now I can actually do my work, if you will. I'm no longer worried about like getting like, checking my boxes and being a good quote unquote Christian. I have experience of love. I found heaven and I don't intend to leave. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because it's definitely not the language you're using is definitely not what most Christians would be able to understand or have a box for, which is why we love this podcast. So
I hope that some people are just like, what the fuck is she talking about? Because girl, sometimes I don't even know. And that's the mystery, isn't it? Like even everything I'm saying now is poetic approximation.
Poetic approximation. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime we talk about God, we're only talking about a metaphor anyways. Because God is not that which I can understand fully, but that which I can explore endlessly.
Yeah, a lot of what you're saying Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. A lot of what you're saying kind of reminds me of this Eastern mysticism view of like enlightenment, waking up, and like, because something I've thought about in terms of like how Jesus could have been like an enlightened person was when he talks about the kingdom of heaven is now. And I feel like you said something to that effect of like, we're already in the kingdom. We just need to like wake up to it or something like that. Is that an accurate?
Yeah. And even Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you.
Within you, right.
There's actually in a non-canonical gospel, the gospel of truth, which was one of the early teachings and early books that early Jesus people used before the Bible was canonized by the quote-unquote holy Roman Catholic Church. There's a passage in there that says, speak of the day that has no night and the light which shines within, and then say to yourself that you are that day and that within you dwells the light. And I'm like, that's what Jesus was trying to get at this whole time, is like, you could see peace instead of this.
Yeah.
Okay, so Romans 16 is great. I'm gonna transition us here.
Hard transition. Let's get into it.
No, this is gonna be so smooth. Romans 16 is great because the view that most people have of Paul is, one way, and it's kind of harsh.
AKA, he's a dick.
Yeah,
Nobody
a lot of
likes
people
him.
don't resonate with Paul. But then you get to 16, and it almost takes a hard turn here, and it's like, now we're gonna like thank all these other people, and most people I think don't sit in this chapter enough to go, these names are really interesting, and what they indicate to us about the Christian community that Paul, is writing to and is a part of should be, I think, an expansive idea of like, wow, this is bigger than maybe we want to think. And that's why we thought you'd be a great addition to this conversation of like, how do we learn to have this conversation broader? And, in particular, we're going to look at this, but like, there's a whole bunch of women in chapter 16. And, most people are like, women. Oh, Paul's the anti-female guy. And then you get to 16, you're like, well, why is he talking about all these females? So just quick glance, like what's your feeling about chapter 16? What's your reaction to it when you see these names?
It is proof that women have always been a part of the church's story and the creation, and like the creation, the sustaining, and like the evolution of the church at large, Big C church. Women have actually been, in many cases, the holistic heart of the church that have been like, they're the only reason there's anything good left in it, to be honest.
Amen.
And something I often like to tell people, this is, if you go to seminary, one of the things that is going to break your heart, if you go to a seminary that's actually like accredited and not like your Southern Baptist place, because like, no offense to, anyways, let me not do that.
No offense at all. Yeah.
No offense to the Theo Bros. We
actually, full offense to all of them. Y'all, so many of them are academically dishonest when it comes to understanding what the Bible is and who wrote the Bible. And specifically, Paul, who's in Romans 16, is naming all of these women who are leaders in these local Jesus clubs, because they weren't really churches in the way that we think of churches. They were like individual, like social clubs, because there were social clubs all over these cities. By the way, if you want to read more about this, you can read the book After Jesus, Before Christianity. It is an incredible resource, super historically based, written by amazing folks. Churches were not churches the way we think of churches. They were individual groups of people doing individual stuff and having individual problems, which is what Paul was writing to them about. And so people get really bent out of shape thinking, just like, okay, Paul's anti-woman, but he's thanking people here. And also in Galatians, he says, I tell you the truth that in Christ Jesus, there's neither male nor female, Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, for you are all one. How is it that the same man said also, I suffer not a woman to teach or lead a man, but she should remain silent? How is that person the same? Answer, they weren't.
Dun, dun, dun.
What?
That's the thing. That's the thing. And, what did you call it? Like, you brought up the word pseudepigrapha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's like
pseudepigrapha, or is it pseudo-edipigrapha? I've heard some people pronounce. Yeah, pseudepigrapha. Yeah, let's go with that.
Basically, it means that like somebody after Paul's death was like, I really like Paul, and I want this letter to have the same weight as him, so I'm going to use his name. And then it's very telling around the time the Bible is being formed at the Council of Trent, that which books are we going to pick? We're not going to pick the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. We're not going to pick the Gospel of Truth or the Gospel of Thomas, which were important texts. We're not going to pick these beautiful poetic psalms that are part of the early Jesus movement. We're going to pick the ones that point us towards patriarchy. Isn't that interesting? And yet, for some reason,
but they let Romans slide. They let Romans 16 in there.
And that's the thing. It's just like they didn't think that we were going to like read it very closely, because most people don't.
Jokes on them. Don't. We're doing a podcast on 16 right now.
Joke's on you, Council of Trent.
No, we've actually talked about that, Kevin. There's a book. I don't know if you've read it, called The Forgotten Creed. And incredible book that makes the point that you just made. And that line that Paul says in Galatians, he actually makes the argument that was the first creed of the early church. And so when Paul's writing that, he's referencing a creed that the earliest church believers already knew. And that's what Christianity was built on. And then Paul's referencing that because he's like, yeah, this is what it's all about. And then later they came around like, yeah, let's add some other stuff, because that's too radical to live by that.
Because you can't make a political statement that says, I believe in love.
Right.
Because what is the Apostles' Creed? I believe in God, the Father Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, of all things seen and unseen, in his only begotten Son, light from lights, blah, 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 blah. I believe in these like very, very concrete things, but you can't say that you are all one. You can't say, like, from a political standpoint, you can't say that everybody's one. Because if you do that, you upset the system of an empire.
Right.
Yeah.
Woo! We are going to go some places today, y'all.
No, I think it's so cool, too, because I think, there may be someone listening to this who's like feeling very rattled, right? Like, oh, what does this mean? Like, I've never had this thought. So there's that. And I want to be sensitive to that. Like, if this is your first time in this journey, it's a bit of discomfort. But the encouragement is keep going, because it's okay. And, there's people like us who will join you along the way, and, come on in, the water's fine. Like,
don't worry. We're not totally crazy. We're just crazy about the truth.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we've properly introduced the idea of pseudepigrapha, and like the idea of like these letters were not actually written by Paul to someone who is maybe hearing this for the first time?
I mean, I think so. The long and short of it, if you need a clear statement that there are books in the New Testament that are said to be written by the Apostle Paul that were in fact not written by the Apostle Paul, but are called, from the academic standpoint, pseudepigrapha, which just basically means that somebody lied about who they was and somehow ended up in canon.
Well, and just to add a note on that happens beyond even Paul. Like, you can go to the ending of the Gospel of Mark ends abruptly, and then there's this whole other ending to it that's they
just
believe
tacked on.
was not Mark, was all added on. So that's why I think I love your intellectual dishonesty line, because there is an element of people are like, well, how do you believe this? Like, well, I went to seminary and I realized it wasn't as clear as you guys told me it was, and you start finding these things out, and you're like, well, that's messy, and what do I do with it? And and you either clamp down and like, okay, we gotta lock everything up and, let's just find a way to be certain about it. Or you just lean into the messiness and go, let's figure out what do we learn about this and what do we learn about God. And I think that's where these conversations are so fun, because it's like, it's super messy.
Yeah.
When I was first thinking about like how to tackle Romans and like specifically this chapter, I was thinking, kind of the traditional way that you would approach a passage like this with our kind of show, where you kind of like try to show both sides, is the issue of like, okay, can women do ministry? Because Romans 16 seems to be very pro women ministry according to Paul, but according to Paul and other passages in the New Testament, he doesn't want women to even speak, and they need to ask their husbands at home, all this stuff. And I just feel like, of the three of us, we probably all are kind of on the same page in terms of, yeah, it's okay for women to preach, right?
Nope. In fact, I'd be happy if I never heard another man preach for the rest of my goddamn life. I'm so serious. I'm so serious.
Well, just on that note, Jeff, before you keep going,
sure.
I just heard recently of a church that their tradition is every Easter they have a female preach only. And their whole argument is women were the first preachers of the resurrection, so we don't have men preach on that day, which is such a cool, like, practical thing, I think, for churches to do, because normally it's Mother's Day is when you bring the females out, right? And they get one weekend a year. But I would just say, if you're a pastor listening to this and you're thinking, I want one weekend a year, I'm going to put a female in the pulpit, put her on Easter and just rock everybody's world. And
I mean, if you're also just like, if you're only putting her up on one weekend a month, you've got bigger problems, baby.
Oh, a year. Yeah. Not a month, a year.
Like that too. If you're only putting on one thing a year, just like, you're also missing out on just
totally.
Yeah, considering they're like 50% of the population.
Well, and as Romans 16 indicates, like,
yes,
there's all these women involved.
Yes, all these beautiful, amazing, like if you actually look up who people like Junia was and Phoebe and Priscilla, like, all these people were like householders who were followers of Jesus in the way, and they would gather people together for meals and singing together, and food. And that was kind of like the early structures, was like, let's come together, let's really vibe in the presence. The larger the party grows, the more things get out of hand, and then you got to have people write you letters and stuff like that. But what we lose track of all the time is that in Rome, there are all these little different clubs headed up by all these different little people who are all I'm thinking, like, in my mind's eye, I see them all in their neighborhoods. Like, Junia's people over here, they got like 15. Priscilla's people got like 20. You know, whoever else got 5 people over here, and they're just taking care of one another. Like, that was the reason that Christianity was so delightful and popular, is because, again, like, one of the earliest creeds, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, male nor female. It's super subversive, and I think that people liked the idea that no matter where they came from, they could experience being treated with dignity and love, which is what the empire afforded nobody except Roman citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of reflecting on my own journey just in these past couple of months that we've been going through the book of Romans. I was re-listening to our first episode, Intro to Romans, and I was talking about how I'm kind of dreading this because I had this very negative picture of Paul, and most of it had to do with the fact that I couldn't get out of my head all those anti-women speaking in church passages from the other epistles. So this was relative news to me that I've kind of learned throughout researching as we've gone through this book. And to me, this is, I mean, such a relief. Like, this is good news that we don't need to have this tension with the Apostle Paul. You know, it's good news if you want to be a defender of Paul and say, like, he wasn't as bad as you might be picturing him.
Yeah.
It does create this huge problem of, we have these canonized books that are considered authoritative and are taught and are believed by Christians, and of course have historically and to this day are used to objectify women, cause women to submit, cause women to be silent. And I guess, so that's, you know, that's another problem. To me, that seems like a lesser problem. Like, if you, because you can't have both. Like, I'll take the pseudepigraphy theory over the theory that, like, Paul just was sexist and wanted women to shut up. But then the question becomes, what do you do with these books? Like, why are these books still here?
And you know what I say to that? Let them go. Just let them go. Because, like, the thing about it is like, within our church context, and like any sort of, like, within any church, there's communities have different scriptures that they hold up as important. You know, whether it's like to their church culture or to their own personal stance or whatever. But everybody's like, you know, everyone's like, you can't just cherry pick what you want from scripture. You got to take the whole thing. We're all doing it. We're already doing it. Even mainline churches, they use the lectionary. They get through a bunch of stuff, but they don't get through everything. They are selecting which texts to hold up as important. And so for me, I'm just like, I don't mind holding on to shitty things. I don't mind holding on to the things that are quote unquote incorrect, as long as the person who's teaching them understands that. And then also on top of that, just like, as a spiritual teacher myself, is just like, I just know what text to avoid. Because at the end of the day, also, I'm not arguing with the teacher Jesus. I'm arguing with Paul, who also didn't physically know Jesus either. Like, let's talk about that. We are like, people are following a person who's a mystic himself, who had a ball of light blind him on the side of the road. Like, no one's just like, oh yeah, Jesus came to Paul after his death and just blinded him on the side. That's fucking weird as shit.
Yeah, I do think about that because like oftentimes when people talk about like the evidence for the resurrection, they count the Apostle Paul as an eyewitness, presumably because of the road to Damascus experience. And I always think like I don't think the Book of Acts is very clear about that being a physical embodiment of Jesus. I always picture it more as kind of a heavenly vision kind of thing. Though it is in red letters. When it says, Saul, why are you persecuting me? They put that in red letters because
of course they did.
Jesus talking. And I always thought like that seems like a little bit of a creative liberty, perhaps, but I guess the red letters aren't canon necessarily.
The red letters are again also just creative, creative.
It's all
unless
presentation.
You're a red letter. Yeah, unless you're a red letter Christian. Remember when that was a thing?
Oh yeah, that was big.
So Jeremy, I'm kind of dying to hear your opinion. Kevin, I love what you shared, but I'm just imagining like, my aunts and uncles, my mom and dad, who may or may not be listening to this. You're conservative, Bible believing Christians.
Who hears somebody says, throw it out.
Yeah, who I don't think are going to be quite as open to the idea of throwing out certain books of the New Testament. And Jeremy, you seem to agree with this idea that these letters were not in fact written by Paul, but of course you can speak for yourself. But how do you reconcile this? What do you do with this problem?
Yeah, so my hermeneutic is always like what points us to Jesus and what looks like Jesus, and then I work backwards from that. So when I get to something that is claims to be written by Paul that looks very contrary to Jesus, I just am like, whoa, hold up, that doesn't just. I don't get a blanket endorsement on that. I got to do some research. And I just to follow back up on something, Jeff taught me something the other day. I used evidently a Mormon analogy, and I had no idea it was a Mormon analogy.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I talked about like, hey, if you see something that's super weird in a text, I encourage Christians, like the first thing I said is just pause it. Like hit pause before you go like, I gotta follow this. Like just hit pause and go, okay, that's weird. Doesn't look like Jesus. Maybe there's something else going on. Like that's the beginning posture. Then I said, which again, this gets into evidently a Mormon practice, like put it on a shelf until you have an idea of like what to do with that. The idea being, which is where I think I would totally agree with Kevin. I'm not going to let some weird random text hold me captive today from experiencing and following Jesus. And that was the epiphany I've come to, is like, there are things that I have done like as a pastor that I felt like I had an obligation to do, that now I look back on and I go, that didn't look like Jesus, but I felt like I was obligated to do it. And I like release that now. Like I'm not that person anymore. And that's been a journey for me. And so I think a lot of people, that's a journey that is probably yet to begun for many Christians of like, can I have the freedom? And I hope conversations like these give encouragement to that of like, you can start to explore this. And ultimately to me, it's like, if I had to take Paul's, cultural things about women, and I use Paul in air quotes here because we attribute it to Paul, but and I had to take that literally, that would make it harder for me to follow Jesus, which just think about that line. There can be texts in the Bible, and don't even get us going on the Old Testament, right? That if you just took them literally, would make it harder for you to follow Jesus. And I go,
and also would disqualify all of us who are non-Jews.
Totally. And amidst a whole bunch of other problems it would bring up. But I'm not going to let those texts, impair me from my pursuit of Jesus and my experience of Jesus. And that's where I'm at. So I'm a little hesitant on the throw it out verbiage, I guess. Maybe I'll get there.
Oh, you will. Give yourself 5 years.
Yeah, maybe. You could be right.
I didn't think I was going to come out as gay. I didn't think I was going to come out as non-binary.
Is that the next step?
I mean, no, I'm just saying for everyone in their evolution of faith, it starts. We all start off with these little things. Oh, can I do this little thing? And we think we can do, but at the end of the day, God is going to blow the sides off of all this anyways, because again, none of this actually matters, in my opinion, because again, at the end of the day, like you said, what does this have to do? If Jesus's whole edict was love God, love others, right? What you have, like, love others as an extension of yourself. if that's the only thing that we really have to worry about, me going over these little things, like, I don't want to argue about the Bible anymore personally. I don't think it's that important. It's like, for me, it's a non-essential when it comes to quote unquote following Jesus.
To me, the issue is just truthfulness, truth telling, right? Like, even if you want to say, well, there's some good things in First Timothy, you know, it's worth hanging on to because there's some gems of wisdom in there. You know, I just feel like if you're gonna lie about who you are, like that should just be disqualifying in of itself. You know, like, we can keep it, we can decanonize it, obviously keep it for posterity in terms of like the Gnostic Gospels or something like that. But I don't know, it seems disingenuous to me to just keep it in there for the sake of tradition or something. I don't know
I
what you
agree.
guys think of that.
But also, I don't think it's always like an all or nothing, you know? And I think we don't realize how many hands were on these texts and through the years and copying and, you know, and continue to write it down. And so even like going back to my example of Mark, like I wouldn't throw out the whole Gospel of Mark because someone added a fake ending. I would throw out the fake ending. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So to me, that's where I go, okay, let's study this. Let's figure out like, oh yeah, that part isn't in the early manuscripts, doesn't sound at all like Mark, doesn't even sound consistent to what Mark is doing. Let's maybe not put that as equal weight, you know? And so to me, I always end it with the shorter ending of Mark. I'm like, this is where Mark ended it. And I think it's awesome. And it's messy and abrupt and I love it. So to me, I would go, oh, like, all right, let's dive into some of these books. If the entire book is, you know, we can conclusively go, yeah, that was not written by the person, then sure, I would say let's put pause on that, right? Like,
you want to say throw it out so bad, but you don't want to get canceled.
I love it.
Just say it, Jeremy. No pressure, but just say it.
You know,
maybe.
Listen, it's one of those things where if you say it, it's kind of like if you say you're gay out loud, you don't burst into flames and you realize, maybe this is okay.
Well, you know what, Kevin, for me, you know what that my experience with that was, I forever wanted to not believe in the literal eternal conscious torment of hell and felt like I had to. And I was raised with that. And I always felt like I have to do it. Well, then, you know, I got into like, oh, there are other views. And I dipped my toe into the water of annihilationism, which is kind of like the middle view, right? And then I was like, okay, I still seem to be within orthodoxy, you know. And then it was honestly when I stepped away, I was a lead pastor, and I stepped away from that, and for a lot of reasons. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh yeah, I'm fully universal reconciliation, like full. And it was like I just needed some space of like the ability to be like just true to what I was feeling. Like, yeah, I don't resonate with this view. Like, this is what I resonate with. And that was really eye-opening for me to the journey you're talking about of like, sometimes I think you just got to take the next step of like, okay, what do I sense? And I would say the way, you know, like what's the Spirit leading me to next? And like this freedom, you know,
because what does it say in the good book anyways? It is the Spirit of God that will lead us into all truth.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. Another thing too, it's like, the more that your worldview begins to open up, the more that you experience the wisdom of other faith traditions and other people who are not strictly in your Christian box, or like the more non-Christian writers I read, the more I see myself honestly being pointed back to my own tradition, because I'm seeing like, oh my God, there's literally like so much beauty and you know, quote unquote truth. And by that, I mean the thing that is getting me close to the presence of God in all of this. And so for me, I think it's easy to say, throw out what isn't helpful anymore, because that's already what I'm doing anyways, because I'm finding wisdom in all these different traditions. The way that David Hayward says it is like, I got like Christianity is my home. I just got cabins all over the place, spiritually speaking. And so that's what I think, like, that's kind of like I think for a lot of people, it starts there with like, it's okay for people to be gay and love God. And then it's okay for people to be gay and not love God. It's okay. It's one of these things where if God has it all, then God has it all. And what am I worried about? I can think anything. I can believe anything. I can even believe nothing. And God, allegedly, has unconditional love for me. And is that not good news?
Yeah, that would be the universalist gospel, right?
Yeah. But listen, if you don't want to throw anything out, you don't got to. I'm not going to push you on that.
Well, okay. Well, so Jeremy, can I push back just a little bit? Like, just hypothetically, I want to ask you, like, so because you do speak at more like normal evangelical churches, right?
Yeah.
For your day job, when you're not on this, punk rock podcast, speaking truth to power.
This podcast does not pay my bills. Yes.
Period.
Yeah, I'm keeping it all for myself. All right, but so hypothetically, like if you were asked to speak at a church and it's like, oh, we're doing a series on First Timothy, so you need to like do this, you need to preach on this passage this Sunday. How would you approach that? Like, would you refuse it out of principle? Would you say like, I'll preach it, but I have to give this huge qualifier of it says it's written by Paul, but it's not written by Paul? Like, how would you handle that kind of situation?
Depends on which text, but like there's certain I've said numerous examples like I won't preach that text the way you want it preached, and I've opted out of numerous opportunities like that. Like let's say they wanted me like, we want you to preach this this Pauline legalistic view of women. I would say, hey, I'll preach that text, but I'm going to argue that I don't think it was Paul who wrote it, and then I'm going to talk about this creed in Galatians. Like, are you cool with that? And if they said yes, then I'll preach that text. I'm not going to preach it the way you probably envisioned it.
I'm going to preach against it.
Yeah, but I'll preach that text and point. And so to me, that's what the way I view it, like with my voice is like, okay, I get invited into spaces where most of these people don't hear from people like me, right? Mm-hmm. They don't get other points of view like that. And so I feel like I have an opportunity to maybe open someone's eyes, to encourage them, to help them on their own journey to take a step forward. And so like, I always try to take the text that way. And, most of the time I just take it where I want to go anyways. So it's like, yeah, I'll take whatever topic you want, but I'm going to ultimately point it back to the Jesus that I've experienced and Jesus I see. And there's a few like few topics that I just won't touch. Like if someone wants me to preach a tithing message, I'm like, nope, no thanks. I don't believe it. Won't preach it. Won't encourage anybody to do that. So there are a few things like that. I'll have like a joke with people. They'll be like, hey, we want you to teach on that. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you want to give me that topic? Because here's where I would take it. And then it's up to them. Do we want that? Or no, we'll wait, wait to have you do a different one.
I would love to like any of those spaces. I'm just like, let me at them. Let's blow your mind one Sunday.
But to me, it's so cool when someone comes up to you afterward and is like, I've never thought about it like that, or like has some genuine spiritual like moment epiphany. And you realize like I could have been a catalyst on their journey. Like that's super encouraging to me. And so I don't have to live in that space anymore. And that's kind of where I've landed. Like, I don't want my paycheck to come from the local church because then I have to adhere to all these things that I don't feel like that's what I'm wired to do anymore or called to do. But I feel like I can go visit those spaces almost like a missionary, like I'll go visit it and speak into it and then pop back out and live where I live and say what I feel like. Certainly I get less invites these days than I used to because I've been more vocal, in recent years on some of the things I believe. And that
thing about it is
a lot of your invites.
Let it all fly. Get disinvited from everywhere so you can get invited to the places who actually want you. Like dead ass. Like that's the thing like I've thought about so much is like when I came out, I was a missionary, I was a worship leader, I was getting booked to go speak places. And again, as soon as I came out, lost everything.
So how long ago was that for you?
Almost 9 years. Almost 9 summers ago. And so it's like couldn't have been a better thing to happen to me. I can't walk into spaces without my full, like I can't, like I'm queer as hell. Like there's no way that I can't walk in there. So it's like, but I used to do the same thing. I used to keep my opinions to myself. I used to keep all these secrets just so I could get possibly invited to some other space. But now I find on the other side of it, it's like, let me get lost. Let them lose me. I'm a gift to be had, and if they want me, they'll ask me. But otherwise, like, what does it say? If the town will not receive you, shake the dust from your feet and get the fuck out of Jordan. That's what Jesus said. That's in the Bible.
Which paraphrase was that? Is that the message?
KGV, the Kevin Garcia version.
Sounded like the message a little bit.
Listen.
Like a more angry message.
KGV,
oh my God.
Yeah, I love that.
The KGV, Kevin Garcia version.
So yeah,
Whenever,
Kevin, I was going to ask you, because obviously you're a public speaker, personality person. Are you in a position where you get invited to more conservative spaces and you take the opportunity to challenge people, or I'm assuming it's more more of the progressive type Christians who would invite you?
I do not get invited into conservative Christian spaces ever, point blank period, and I never will, because I'm gay.
Right.
And from the jump, that's a non-starter for them. For them, it's not even a possibility for me to be a Christian and be queer, let alone like a mystic and expansive person who like floats around with Jesus and Krishna, you know? Like that, they don't have it in their imagination that someone like me could possibly be in relationship, quote unquote, relationship with Jesus. So when I am invited to places, it's, a lot of deconstruction heavy spaces where like we're talking about what do we do after? What from this tradition is still helpful to us? What do we want to preserve or transform? What do we want to compost? And then what comes next? And it's the most delicious thing in the world because I'm no longer worried about offending anybody. I'm no longer worried about having to edit myself. I have never been more free or happy in my life. And I have no secrets. Like, oh my God, the weight of secrets, toxic. I don't have to be afraid of anything or anyone because, again, I have experience of God's love. What a fucking concept, huh?
Now, 9 years ago, when you decide, like, all right, I've got to publicly come out with this, were spiritually where you are today, or was that like that? This has been a 9-year journey for you.
It felt like the first probably 2 to 3 years, I was still trying to fit myself into a very respectable version of what it meant to be a gay Christian, strictly gay Christian man. And, I was on the board with just like, you got to save sex for marriage, and marriage is between two people, monogamous for laugh. And now I'm at a place where I don't believe in that at all. I think you should have sex with whoever you want to. And I think that monogamy is optional. And I still think that one can have a God, quote unquote, God honoring relationship outside of the parameters of patriarchy. I'm living proof of that. When I first came out, I was still conservative in all the ways, except for it's okay to be gay and women can be in leadership. And then from there, it's like, once you start picking apart, well, why, it's not so much what do I believe, but why do I believe what I do? And once I understood why I believed stuff about LGBTQIA and women, you naturally pull apart everything else. And so that led to me deconstructing what I thought about race, what I thought about gender itself, what I thought about the local church, what I thought about turtles all the way down.
You fell down that slippery slope.
Yeah. But I will say, oh my God, yeah, the slippery slope. You start off with being gay and you end up
pulled too many threads out of the sweater, right?
Yeah. It was I think it was first like be gay and then start practicing yoga and then watch CNN. Like that's like at the very bottom of it.
It's the dominoes meme of the little domino that leads to World War III at the end.
Yeah.
In your journey, did you stray full on into atheism for a time and kind of come back to believing in God, or have you always had a sense of spirituality?
No, I don't think I can ever say that I was an atheist. I will say maybe in seminary for a little bit, but not for long. Mostly because it was a feeling of just like what I knew. It was like the final curtain got torn back in college or in seminary, and that final curtain was like on the church, not God. Though I would say that like honestly, it's felt less like a deconstruction and more of an evolution. Like I feel like my heart just blossomed with life, and it was like, have you seen those like post-apocalyptic movies where just the grass and trees have grown over all the buildings and everything is just reclaimed by the earth? That's what my heart did. I could no longer fit my heart into that space. And so it just naturally took over again.
Yeah.
It naturally moved outward. And to answer the question from before, like, no, it didn't happen all at once. I did have an incredible mystical experience when I did LSD the first time where I met God, if you will. And by that, I mean, I experienced such a profound sense of union with spirit that I've never forgotten, and it has changed my life. I was absolutely certain at that point that God is love, and that love is endless, and I've never forgotten it.
That's incredible. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Totally off topic here, but now I'm just so curious because
Sure.
I've heard a lot of people talk about how like psychedelics can like enhance your view of God or make you like meet God, as you just said with LSD. For me, it was kind of the opposite. Like I did mushrooms one time, and it was incredible, euphoric, amazing experience. And to me, that just confirmed, oh yeah, God's not real, because clearly this is just chemicals in the brain that
Sure.
caused me to have this, religious experience. Like I couldn't help but think, like, if someone would have like slipped that to me, and then I would have gone into like a church worship service or something, that would have been definitive proof that God is real, because I'm like, clearly I had an encounter with the Holy Spirit. But so what? Why did you meet God on LSD? What did that mean to you?
Well, I think perhaps like I had already known from before, because like when I was 9 years old, I had a pretty cool mystical experience too, sans drugs, before I touched anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I was already, I think in some ways, like the pump was primed in that direction anyways. Like that's how I would like, defining the mystical experience, defining the inexplicable, defining that mystery as God. But I think for me, like I think the reason I would say like I met God that night, what I really mean is I met myself, if I'm being frank. Because like I'll just share with you a little brief anecdote from that experience. I had this picture very, very clearly of I was watching myself, and the self that I was watching was this little baby version of me, and it was like, I'm just this little baby in life, running around, having all of these fun adventures, naked as the day is long. And God is watching me delight in all of these things. And when I fall down and I scrape my knee and I start to cry, and when I get scared, God comes in like a loving parent to hold me. Said another way, when I am conscious of what's actually going on in my body and in my mind, I have the capacity to care for myself. And that care that I give to myself, I believe, is the love of God. Where else would it come from? And nobody else, like, you don't have to define it that way, but just like for me, self-love is love of the divine. And that for me, just like, it just became so clear that God always sees me through this lens of just a little baby. And if I could view myself in that same kind of tenderness, knowing that the part of me that suffers is just a little baby, then like I can be compassionate with the whole of creation. And that night became so clear that if I wanted to heal, I had to learn softness. I had to learn that God was not an abusive parent. God is just this. I experienced such a feeling of love in that evening. Again, it was life-changing for me, because before I was just, I don't know, ready to give up on the whole religion and spirituality thing altogether. And something, I mean, at least that's how I interpreted that beautiful experience. To this day is, and I'm totally open to the possibility that it could have just been all chemicals in my brain. But in the words of Dumbledore, is, of course it was all in your head, Harry, but does that mean it was any less real?
Oh, yes.
Not to quote a fucking turf, but to quote the spirit that was channeled through her bullshit.
Speaking of problematic authors that
oh my god,
you can't knock Dumbledore. Come on,
complicated.
Don't take Dumbledore down.
Yeah, it's one of those things with like, I kind of think of it like, okay, like every text, take what's helpful, throw out the rest.
Yes, like separating the art from the artist, right? Which is kind of what
he reads Harry Potter like he reads the Bible.
Doing with Paul a little bit here. Yeah.
Yeah, J.K. Rowling died. Joe Rowling is the one who's the turf,
Yeah,
right?
the tweets are all pseudepigraphic.
Pseudepigrapha by somebody who just replaced J.K. Rowling with his turf.
Yeah.
Just like Avril Lavigne got replaced by a lizard person, right?
Right.
Anyone
and Paul
read that
McCartney,
conspiracy theory?
A lot of conspiracy theories getting dropped right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is all canon, by the way. This is all true. You can't question it. So
for sure. Yeah,
obviously.
Don't question us. Don't look into it either.
Yeah, we appreciate your time. I just had one other question.
Yeah,
if you
I've
have
got
a few minutes. Okay, sure.
do.
So verses 17 and 18 here. And now I make one more appeal, my dear brothers and sisters. Watch out for people who cause division and upset people's faith by teaching things contrary to what you have been taught. Stay away from them. Such people are not serving Christ our Lord. They're serving their own personal interests by smooth talk, glowing words, and they deceive innocent people.
That's you, Hillsong.
The smoothest talkers of them all. This passage, I thought, it kind of made me reflect on the whole premise of our podcast in general, because I would say Jeremy and I, we're coming from different places belief wise. And I would say like the goal has always been bringing people together and finding common unity and stuff. Is there ever a time when it's inappropriate to like allow people to bring in disagreeing voices or people who cause division, as this passage is talking about?
It's one of those things where, like, I would say, I'm not a follower of Paul, I'm a follower of Jesus. And Jesus said, I did not come to bring unity, but I came to bring a sword to divide mother from daughter, father from son. And it's like, I look at something like that and I'm just like, the cost of following Jesus, if you will, he's like, and he said it right there, just like, in order to stand in solidarity with the people who are being oppressed, you're gonna upset people in your circles. And so for me, it's just like when Paul is writing, watch out for people who cause divisions, and teachings contrary to what I have taught. We have to what is Paul teaching? Probably all of what's in Romans. But again, Paul is not authoritative to me. Paul is an opinion like everybody else. And I think that if someone, maybe, again, context is everything. I don't think that this advice is applicable to modern day churches all the time, at least not in the way we think, because it's like, if somebody in power, like we say, like at a Hillsong or an Elevation Church or anybody in these large spaces, can use that and say, Kevin over there is causing division. And it says right here in Romans 16, you can't do it. They're serving their own interests, blah, blah, blah. And I would turn around and I would point back at that pastor and I would say, that pastor has glowing and smooth words and is like abusing all of these people. And like, here's all these stories. Why are we not believing them? Well, because it says in Romans 16, watch out for people who cause division. Mm-hmm. And that, my friend, is called manipulation. That's called gaslighting. And so, like, I really do think it's important. Like, if someone is causing your spiritual community to be upset or to cause harm to other people, at the end of the day, that's always going to be my litmus test is there harm being caused? If there is not harm being caused by somebody disagreeing or bringing a different opinion to something, then like, it's fine. It's when personal harm comes in. And I think that's much more applicable to the conversation of a modern spiritual community. So
that's a great interpretation. When I was reading this passage, my initial thought was just like, is Paul saying like Christians don't listen to the atheist voices or something because they might cause you to stumble in your faith? But I love how you took it more in the direction of pastors who are abusing their congregants. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is also like, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's beautiful. There's different kinds of division, right? There's division where I'm going to literally turn people against each other, where they are further apart. There's less love. There's more hate. That's a kind of division, right? Then there's division of thought, or I'm going to challenge this, or we're going to get to something better, right? What's been fascinating to me is, Kevin, as I watch you give your answers, your body physically aligns with the words that are coming out of your mouth. Like, you come to life when you talk about God and you talk about love and you talk about this best version of you, which that's not division. That's like literally you like being the fullest you, coming to that. And I think that's our goal here is like, yeah, we're going to divide in the sense of we're going to talk about differences of opinion and thoughts, and we don't all land the same, but it's for the ultimate, like, let's learn how to thrive together and be an encouragement. And like, from my little time with you, I would say you just physically embody it. Like, I love it.
What a treat. Well, I received that. That feels very nice to hear. And I hope that people recognize also that at the end of the day, just because we're a bunch of assholes on a podcast doesn't mean that we're closer to God than you, and doesn't mean that our interpretation is correct. And I would say, don't believe anything I tell you. Test everything. Test out everything we say. See if it's true. Because it might not be. We could be idiots, for all we know.
Well, we all are idiots, but
check your sources.
Hopefully, we get a few things right.
We'll put some books in the description and stuff for sure.
Yeah. This was fun. This was really cool.
This was fun. This was our first and most not safe for work episode ever. So thank you for that, Kevin.
Sorry, everyone. Don't listen to this with your kids. There's some blue words around. My bad.
Incredible. Yeah, totally agree with what Jeremy was saying. You truly practice what you preach. You really embody someone who has been set free by some kind of spiritual enlightenment. And I love to see that for you. So that's incredible. So thank you for being our guest. Do you have anything you want to plug? We'll put like your website and social media and stuff, of course, in the description. But
yeah, you can follow me across social media at the Kevin Garcia. My book is called Bad Theology Kills: Undoing Toxic Belief and Reclaiming Your Spiritual Authority. It's available at badtheologykills.com. And depending on when this comes out, my second book, which is called What Makes You Bloom: Developing a Practice for Connecting with Your Divine Self, should be available for pre-order by the end of June.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Oh my God.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. It's not going to be out till January 2024, but my God, I'm so excited about it. Other than that, go buy my merch. It helps pay the bills. It's all on my website. It's cute and it's gay, and like you can support a queer artist during Pride Month.
It's cute and it's gay. There you go.
That's how I would describe my personal style. Cute and gay.
Cute and gay.
And you can be cute and gay too.
Well, seriously, Kevin, really appreciate you taking the time. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you. This was so fun. Y'all are really good at talk to. You are really interesting to talk to. I didn't feel bored, and I didn't feel like I had to like carry anything. Really great stuff. You're great interviewers.
Shucks.
Oh, shucks. Thanks. All right, I guess we better wrap it up. Do you feel like we've solved Romans? Do we know what Romans is about? We might.
There are no more questions left.
No more questions. Yeah, we might have some future episodes to unpack more. But yeah, thanks again to Kevin. This is great. Love you guys.
Thanks, y'all.
And we'll be back sometime in the future. Okay, bye.
Bye.